Of LinkedIn Live organized by CIVOM on this super special occasion of International Color Day celebrated on March 21 every year. I am Akshay Bajaj and I serve as the co-founder of Global Learning Space Network. Today I'll have the honor of moderating this live session that is graced by a trio of icons who are all set to shed light on the importance of color in design and learning. By the way, I wish to add that it's no wonder that this occasion falls on the day of equinox, that is 21st March. And as per the official website of International Color Association, this day and occasion symbolically relates to the complementary nature of light and darkness, as well as light and shadow expressed in all human cultures. To all the
Oh,
people
is it?
watching us live, we also have a surprise for you where our guest, Ms. Shivani Verma, would be unveiling her insights from her latest research paper titled Color Guide for Learning Spaces in India. Now, let's do the Shubharam of this session by welcoming the three guest panelists we have with us today. Let me give you a quick intro of the guest panelists for this session. On first, we have Ms. Pooja Gupta. Pooja is a co-founder of Tinker Village, an education startup that is working with schools across the country to make learning more hands-on, more experiential-driven, that not only empowers our teachers to deliver a powerful lesson in the classroom, but also builds skills in our children that help them thrive in a 21st century world. She is an MBA from NMIMS Mumbai and comes with over 20 years of experience in building brands with nearly a decade spent in the home improvement industry across India and Singapore, starting with Asian Paints and subsequently AkzoNobel Paints. Pooja is deeply passionate about the impact that color has in our daily lives. She was instrumental in building a full stack color marketing portfolio at Asian Paints almost 20 years back when this was unheard in the home improvement industry. And now, as a co founder of Tinker Village, she is building learning resources for students and teachers where color psychology continues to play a dominant role in Pooja's decision making process. Pooja, ma'am, it's such an honor to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Akshay, for that glorious introduction and for having me here.
Thank you. On second, we have architect Shriya Parasrampuria.
Right.
She is the co-founder and principal architect of Blurring Boundaries, a contextualist design practice in Mumbai engaged in creating sustainable and appropriate biophilic design solution. She is a 2007 graduate from Sir J.J. College of Architecture, Mumbai, and has had an architectural practice for more than 15 years. She has worked on a plethora of residential projects, hospitality projects, educational buildings with ecological materials and techniques. Welcome to this session, Architect Shriya, ma'am.
Hi, thank you, Akshay, for that.
And our third guest for this session is Ms. Shivani Verma, a graduate of NID with a specialization in textile and apparel design, who is currently working as a design researcher with a focus on CMF, color material finish, in educational environments. Her work primarily explores the physiological and cognitive effects of various colors and materials, examining their behavior, physical properties, aesthetics, and their influence on human perception and neurodevelopment in learning spaces. Welcome to this session, Shivani.
Thank you so much, Akshay. Thank you so much.
Okay, perfect. So it's incredible to have a trio of icons with us, and this session is going to have three themes where we'll be rotating the questions to our guest panelists and to all the people watching us live. You can leave your questions in the comment section, and our guest panelists would be so much happy to guide you all with the answers for those questions. So let's have the first theme that is dedicated to color foundations, theory, and impact. This sounds to be a pretty interesting theme. So let's have the first question for Ms. Pooja Gupta. Pooja, from your experience at Tinker Village and Asian Paints, how do you see fundamental color theory principles translating into engaging and effective learning environments for children? All yours.
Akshay, so I think literally, uh, the color theory principles play a very significant role in helping to build the kind of engaging and effective learning spaces, especially today that we see, the kind of spaces that we see emerging today. Off the cuff, I can think of at least four categories where they make a big impact. One is, of course, in the overall emotions and mood. The second category is somewhere around, bringing attention and focus of children. Third category is the cultural and the age appropriateness of using colors. And fourth, of course, is the overall spatial awareness, how colors help recognize spatial awareness. So to talk about the first category a bit more in detail, which is setting the emotions and mood. Now, typically, your warm colors like the reds, the oranges, and yellows always tend to evoke a lot of energy, in our young learners, a lot of positivity, a lot of enthusiasm. So they've always been a fantastic choice for areas like the play zones and areas that require high energy workouts or high energy outcomes from children. The cool colors like your blues and greens are always great for spaces where you need a little quiet corner or a more reading nook kind of a corner. So in my experience across with Asian paints specifically, I have seen these color choices have made a big difference when we used to work with architects and designers, and we used to sit with the entire 1,000 plus color palette of Asian paints. The second category, of course, is attention. What kind of colors are useful in grabbing the attention of young kids? And typically, high contrast colors like reds and yellow, or a yellow and black. I mean, there is no wonder that, the taxis and cabs on the roads are a yellow and black because they are known to catch attention from a far away distance. And therefore, also our school buses are a clear dominant yellow. So they're always known to, immediately cut through the clutter and catch a child's attention. So these are colors which are always good for using in, such kind of zones and such kind of areas where you want to grab their attention, be it a vehicle, be it a signage, etc. The third category, of course, I would talk about is the overall age appropriateness of color. And young learners, especially our early years, always will engage a lot more with the primary hues. So which is where the red, blues, and yellows come in and make a very effective color palette when it comes to engaging early years. And no wonder all the toys that we see for early years, whether it is that typical that वो toy जो हम सब ने खेला है, that putting the rings one over the other, or whether it's the color wooden blocks, they are primarily found in these colors because the brain can easily absorb and engage. I mean, these are not strange colors to the brain at that young an age. Yeah, and finally, of course, spatial awareness. I mean, spatial awareness was one of my favorite aspects even at Asian Paints because how colors can transform the sheer perception of a space, plays a huge role. When you're using the cooler tones, you get a larger space. When you're using the more deeper, darker tones, it creates for a cozy, intimate kind of a space. So we've played extensively with colors on creating the perception of the same room in a different way. So yeah, I've always felt that color theory plays a very significant role here.
That turned out to be a super energetic start to this session with your take on emotion, spatial awareness, and how high contrast colors for catching attention are used in school buses and taxis, and or how young learners engage more with cool hues. So now let's take this discussion to architect Shreya. So, ma'am, we have a question for you. Like, when designing architectural spaces, how do you balance the theoretical aspects of color with the practical considerations of light and space? Over to you.
So, as Pooja mentioned, the four aspects of the theory are dictated finally by the medium that through which we see it, which is light. So, natural light versus artificial light, warm, cool, and harsh lighting. All these make a huge difference to the way you would see or perceive any space. And if you even if you do a red wall or a high energy wall, but your lighting is not appropriate, then it dulls down the entire atmosphere. And it is extremely important to also understand the impact of light while designing, and checking what how it looks, even while planning the entire space, because it can make or break a space no matter what is the color given to the spatiality of the uh, place. So that is extremely crucial to understand the impact of light. Whether it's cool tones, warm tones, there is something called a sunset tone. So a bedroom would have a much duller, softer, 2700 kind of lighting versus let's say a more high energy office environment, and then following the circadian rhythm to kind of identify what is the color palette that you want to achieve in a space, and the impact again of that color palette within the space, to take it into consideration without considering how it looks in the beginning of the day, in the middle of the day, and in the evening, is something that cannot be ignored. So I think that is extremely important. So the study has to be there while planning itself, and that's something that we keep in mind while we are designing any particular space.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for highlighting how the circadian rhythm also plays an important role while selecting the colors, and how the planning of colors can be made while planning the spaces before getting on with the field. And now let's get this conversation running on to Shivani. So, Shivani, how does your research aligns with these foundational color theories, particularly regarding their psychological effects?
Thank you so much, Akshay. When we say foundational color theories, it take us back to in the 60s, that when Sir Isaac Newton found basic color into the nature, when he passed a beam of light through a prism and he figured out Vibgyor, like violet, indigo, blue. Since childhood, we have all heard about it. That particular color theory has given us the color wheel, which today, till now, all the architects, all the designers, everywhere, we are using it. Abhilash, can you present it? Yeah. When we see the 12 basic hues, why do we call it hues first and foremost? Because these are the pure pigments. There is nothing added into it, like no white, no black. These are the pure hues, pure colors, which we are using over till today. And another thing over here, like Shreya mentioned, that light is the only thing which makes us possible for us to see colors. So light is the way medium through which we see it, the saturation, brightness, how much the light is entering into any color, any space. It gives you how do you see it, how do you feel it. And in any hue, the moment all of us say na another theory that this is the tint, this is the tone, this is the shade. So it's coming because the moment you add white into a hue, it will give you the tint. The moment you add gray into a hue, it will give you the tone. Then you add black, it will give you the shade. This is another way of looking at color theories. There are multiple theories throughout history till now. It has evolved, and we have seen it in that way and used it into our designs and culture. So in nature also, when we see the color wheel, there are monochromatic colors, analogous color, complementary colors, split complementary colors. I'll explain one by one a bit, so at least the foundational color theory will get a clear picture of. So the monochromatic colors are the colors which are tint and tone of one color only, like just the way I explained tint, tone, and shade. So it's just one color. Its tint and tone are the monochromatic colors. Analogous are the colors which are next to the color in the color wheel. Complementary colors are the colors which are opposite in the color wheel. Split complementary are the colors which are opposite to the next to the opposite colors. Triadic colors which form a triangle into the color wheel, and tetradic colors which form a rectangle into the color wheel. After some time, I'll give you an example of how this basic color theory has evolved. Abhilash, next slide. So, when we say the psychological effect of color, each and every color has its own meaning, has its own symbol, has its own positive effect and negative effect, both. Some people find that green is the color of growth, green is the color of harmony, green is the color of balance. But on the other hand, green is also the color of materialism. It's the color of envy, it's the color of judgment. The same way red shows the action, the strength, the power, the love, but it is also the color for anger, for judgment, for revenge. Ablash, next slide. So, when we talk about colors, its meaning, its symbol, its perseverance, it is not solely connected to how do you see it or how do you find it in nature. It is also connected to in what situation, what context you are looking that color. One particular color in different scenarios, different situations can have different meanings. Like love, red is for love also, red is for romance also, red is for traditions also, for holy, for spirituality, but it's also for death, it is also for warning, it is also for rage, it is also for attention. So the cultural context till now, how we have seen and perceived color, how that particular color has the journey throughout the culture, that also creates a lot of impact and effect. In all the food industry, we have seen red around the globe because it is the appetizing color. It stimulates the blood. So the moment the context change, the place change, and how we are putting it up, the perseverance differs, the perspective differs, and especially when we talk about psychology, when men and women also perceive color differently. The way you are going to see red, Akshay, it's going to be probably red. The way Pooja and Shreya are going to see, it's maybe salmon pink, rose pink, peach pink, because the color cones which we have in our eyes, we inherit it through our X chromosome, and women's are the only gender which have two X chromosome. So the RGB cone which we have in our eyes, it gives us two RGB cones, which gives us the power to do more permutation and combination and understand colors very well as compared to any other gender. So that particular differentiation is also now creating a scientific differentiation ki how men and women perceive color differently. So psychologically, when we go, the context, the situation, the way you see colors, it's all going to differ. If I'm going to see red in a graveyard, maybe it's going to give a different impact on me. But on the other hand, if I'm going to see red on Holi, it's going to create altogether different impact. So in our lives as human, it's not only about perseverance, it's about the context, situation, how we are associating it, how we are understanding it. All those things come together, then only we get the clarity of how we actually understanding it, perceiving it. Okay.
Like, applause worthy answer, Shivani. Applause worthy answer. So thank you for explaining how an experiment of passing light through prism went on to give birth to the color wheel, and how there are symbols represented by colors, and finally how the color perception is in both the genders. And this calls for the conclusion of the first theme, and now let's move on to the second theme, that is architectural color, space, light, and sustainability. And who better than architect Shreya to start this session? So, the question coming up to architect Shreya is, when selecting colors for architectural projects, how do you approach the interplay between color, light, and the overall spatial experience? And we would love to have an example of how you use color to enhance a space.
So, of course, color dictates how you perceive the space, and that it's one of the first obvious and intangible aspect of a space that you first experience more than anything else. But color can also be so color is not just application of paint on a wall. It's also materiality. So color is also defined by the texture and material palette of a surface, and not just the color itself. For example, the same terracotta color as a paint versus a brick, okay, versus, let's say, an earth wall, is completely different because of the texture of the wall. So it is important to so that is something that we always kind of play with when we're designing a space, and when we're imagining a space with light filtering through, because how the light affects that material and that texture is also equally important to define the color. So that is one aspect where materiality is extremely important. Then even the finish of the color. For example, in one of our projects, we've used a lot of earthy tones, and we realize that the earthiness of the colors and the texture which is not finished, but which is even the color palette is very patchy, because that's how a lime wall would work. That also affects and helps you settle down into the space. So the hue and the tint of the color also helps you kind of just affects your emotional depth in that space as well, when it's very energetic, and the color is, as mentioned earlier, is more red, yellow. It kind of just makes the space much more vibrant, and makes you want to be active. Whereas when you're entering a bedroom, you want to kind of be intimate, be more settled. So it's not just that you're using blues and greens, but you're also using darker, softer colors of the same. So the hue and tone also of the color makes a huge difference in how you plan the space and what you want to achieve within the space. And in terms of even like the glossiness and the mateness of any color makes a huge difference, because again, glossy colors kind of reflect a lot of light, but that may not be something that you want within the space. You want the space to be quieter and kind of settled. So that is where a matte surface might work much better. So whenever we are kind of planning each space also, we see how natural materials, how materials add their own color and vibrancy to the space, and then add on any additional layers of color per se. But yeah, I mean, I think the touch and feel of a wall also changes the color perception you have of any material when you're seeing it. So yeah.
I would like to add one point into Shreya's point, that it's so true that all the colors, because when we say colors, we just said na ki it's the reflection of light, it's the absorption of light, or it's the pass through of light. So each and every material, its texture, grainy, soft, suede, matte, glossy, all those make so much. Like, I'm going to talk about it in educational spaces, especially because over there, like you just said now, we don't want light to reflect that much. We want the place to be more calmer, more quieter. So wherever we feel like to create some accent or some poppiness at particular places, that's why textures and materials make so much sense into education and in general in our lives. Yes, colors totally rely upon that. Totally.
And you missed that the last line Shreya ma'am spoke was also related to multi-sensory experiences of colors
Yes,
in learning spaces.
yes, yes,
Right?
yes. It
So
does
we got,
create.
from architect Shreya, we got the QOTD, that is quote of the day. Color is not just application of paint on the wall. Materiality, texture, finish are also important, as well as tint of the color affects your emotions. Now coming on to Miss Pooja Gupta. The question for you is, from your perspective, how do current trends in architectural color choices affect the design of children's learning spaces and play areas?
Sure. So, Akshay, I'll break this up into two parts. I'll talk about the learning spaces, and I'll also talk about the impact that color is creating in building unique identities for brands. Yeah, more so to do with my current work in, and especially in the entire space of startups, how colors are really emerging to build unique identity. So talking about learning spaces first, I think I can literally talk about my journey, in the last 20 years. It's such a welcome change when we now see the design and colors in learning areas starting as young as early years. I mean, there is absolutely firstly, there is a complete mushrooming of a lot more early year specific zones and schools across the country. So early years was never, kind of demarcated as a separate entity in itself. It was always part of one large school building. Today we have dedicated centers, institutes, and organizations which are clearly earmarked, and they're only serving early years. Because color plays such a dominant role in a young child's life, it can literally either make a space inviting and welcoming, or it can make it extremely fearful and threatening. Yeah, I mean, if for those of us who have gone to those convent schools where you had those alleys in a convent schools which had those typical standard based hues. I mean, some of
Yes.
those could actually get quite threatening. Whereas now if you see the kind of choices in architectural trends which are dominating and which are truly thinking that when a child walks into the school, he spends those 6 to 8 hours. What is the kind of environment are we looking at building? Is it a space that alienates a child from his world at home? Or is school more like a second home to a child? Now, when you start studying spaces from that perspective, from a use case perspective, that what is the emotion we want the child to connect the school with, color plays a very dominant role in deciding for that. And of course, I mean, we are working now with a range of schools right from early years to middle years, and we couldn't be happier seeing the kind of color choices that architects and founders of schools are working with. The palette is completely, it's a very refreshing palette, it's a very vivid palette, it's a very, very cheerful palette. So, and in fact, India, being predominantly having a very predominant play on color, right, is bringing out its suppressed it's suppressed emotions about using color fearlessly in public spaces. So 20 years back in time, we had to work very hard to convince consumers to go beyond using the pastels, because pastels used to dominate their minds. So we had to really work hard at A Paints to convince them, why just trying out a single wall in a slightly different tone can actually change the way you look at colors. So I think today, I mean, we are so happy to see the bold and fearless choice of colors, that's being used for learning spaces. That apart, like I mentioned, I would like to talk a little bit about how color is helping to build unique identities in this entire startup space. So something which could have taken organizations 10 years, 20 years, in an erstwhile era to build identity. Today color is helping seal that, so easily, and it's helping brands cut through clutter. Like, for example, you think of a Zepto, you think the Zepto purple. You think of a Zomato, you think the red of Zomato, or the orange of Swiggy, and so on and so forth. Even when we were coming up with our choices of color tones for Tinker Village, we kind of, I mean, this is of course, I wear it, on me every day. We were clear that, we wanted the orange of the bulb because it is about sparking curiosity, sparking creativity in children. So we wanted to have the orange and turquoise as a blend. And also, these are colors which are also inclusive colors. Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about more about how we are building for inclusivity, etc. But today, when you see an entire burst of startups, companies, a pressing need for a company to build its unique identity, they don't have the luxury of a decade or 2 decade to build that identity. Yeah, colors are playing a very significant role in the startup space to define that uniqueness in identity.
So while you were saying the colors for brands like red for Zomato, I thought Shivani would say I disagree. Red would be for Akshay, but not for us. It's different. Totally.
Yeah, of course. I mean, women can, Shivani, completely agree, right? And my husband and I, we constantly, for a good long time, I mean, my husband used to wonder, why I can't see so many colors as, as you can see, So I had the exact same answer. So as you were talking, you were just taking me back in time, because this was exactly the kind of conversation. I said, I think it's not a me versus you. I think it's the genes,
It's
the
genetically in
gender,
with
the
us.
gender. So, you know, really. So yeah,
So
yes.
Yeah, so finally we had someone who highlighted the mushrooming of learning spaces dedicated to early years, and there was a quote, very, very cheerful palette, and from us to you is very, very cheerful answer. So let's move on this conversation to Shivani. Shivani, we have a question coming up for you. In your research, have you observed any specific architectural color choices that significantly impact learning environments, especially for children? And you can discuss on sustainable color choices and different architectural styles.
Um, See, throughout the research, I would mention one thing. Abhilash, can you put on the slide, please? I would like to mention one thing specifically. Ki when we talk about architectural colors, and when we talk about educational spaces, uh, any specific color for learning spaces, I wouldn't be say that would be good, because when we talk about education, the main purpose of the space is to provide learning. To the main purpose is over there in that particular area, a lot of all the kids are accumulating to learn something, to get something, to understand how we educate, how we learn, how we get the knowledge. And when we are providing colors for architectural spaces, I would suggest ki in India, like
Uh, I guess Shivani is facing some technical glitch, so she'll be rejoining us in some time. So in the meanwhile, yes, sh- while she joins, architect Shreya can put some thoughts on how colors evoke emotions.
Yeah. Hi. So, you know, uh, the colors, as we discussed, are defined. Divided into various like cool tones, warm tones, neutral tones. Okay, and all the three tones per se have a lot of background um, emotion. Each evokes an emotion very, very strongly, with whether a person realizes it or not. So that is extremely unconscious sometimes and in the backdrop, but the effect and the impact of it is fairly visible if you see it together as a trend or as a tendency. Would Shivani continue with her presentation?
Right.
yeah, I'm sorry, there's no light, so it got disconnected. Next. So, am I audible clearly? Yep.
Yes, well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
what I was trying to
Yes.
say at that time, that India, the diversity we hold today, it's not only about the culture or the cultural background from where we are coming from. It is also about the climatic conditions we are into. And India particularly have 6 climatic zones. Like over here, I mentioned that hot desert arid, mountain climate, arid steppe hot, humid subtropical, tropical monsoon, and tropical savanna. So if we have a very vast diversity in climatic zones, then the color palette in the nature itself changes. The color palette which we see in different climatic zones is altogether different. The colors which I am going to find in Rajasthan area, I'm not going to find in Sikkim. Sikkim may be more of greens, blues, grays. Rajasthan will be more of browns, sand colors, whites. So the color palette and the temperature, the humidity, the airflow, the color we perceive, everything's defined that, because from outside area you are coming any interior space to perceive something, and especially for educational spaces, if you're coming for learning, you have to be in a clear, comfortable, relaxing mindset to understand things, to perceive things with an open arms. Over here I have given one example, like a bit of the comparison between the Rajasthan climatic mood board and a mountain climatic mood board. So you can see a differentiation, like what nature is providing us. The arid steppe in hot climate is, it will take you more of warmer tones, and on the other hand the mountain climate will take you towards the calmer tones. Abhilash, can you put the next slide on? So, when we see colors, the climatic condition and the nature itself, different color palettes, different way of looking at it, different way of perceiving at it. Abhilash, can you show the next slide, please? So, nature has given us more calmer tones. The way I put it up in the first slide now, the analogous color, monochromatic color, split complementary colors. So that theory itself has come from nature. The way we have perceived and understood nature, nobody has thought of before that purple with really good blend with yellow. Nobody has thought of, but nature has given us those certain color palettes which we have later out figured ki okay, certain colors can also go with certain colors. Like over here I have shown you one small section which where the colors can create the extraordinary effect, where the colors can, you know, how to attract the attention, how to complement each other, how to, you know, beautifully blend with the background. And the same way, the way we are seeing colors in nature, we need to look into in enclosed spaces how we are, you know, creating that balance. So if I'm taking red throughout, I'm telling you about red only ki in a desert area I can't directly put red inside a classroom. If either I want to put, I need to look at the ceiling height, I need to look at the emphasis, contrast, foreground, background, in what shape or what size I'm putting the color, what is the texture or the material I'm putting the color into, and at what ratio. So the emphasis of the color inside any area, it's highly dependent upon which climatic zone and which natural background you are putting into. And another thing comes ki what segment you are putting that color for. Is kindergarten, is it primary age group, is it for adolescence age group, is it for adulthood? So the way we have evolved as humans since childhood till the age of 40, our perseverance for colors also differs. We, like you mentioned, now kids are more attracted towards bright colors, accent colors, red, yellows, blues, because at that time they don't know complexity much. If I'm going to put a royal blue and cobalt blue together, it's hard for them to differentiate between them. If I'm directly putting a simple plain blue and simple plain red, it will be easy for them to understand and do the permutation and combinations. On the other hand, when it comes to adolescence age, at that age, kids are more into, you know, understanding the nature, understanding the surrounding, and maybe they are fighting with their friends, maybe they are, you know, chilling with their friends. So they are continuously asking question, framing and reframing. So at that time, their color perseverance is also not very rigid. You know, sometimes they like red, sometimes they like salmon pink, sometimes they like blue. So it changes the moment we shift to adulthood. Adulthood is more about, you know, rigidity. You know, you are surrounded with those roles and responsibilities where you feel like okay, certain things you are accountable for, you have to do that, you have to, you know, cater people into certain way. That is also related to how we, you know, understand colors and how rigid and, you know, precisely define color in our own way. वो definition define हो जाती है वहाँ पे. And towards the oldhood, we are, you know, more towards calmer tones, composed tones, warm tones, which gives us, you know, a peaceful hug sort of feeling. So the way we develop our brain, the way we evolve our surrounding, we cater to, that also defines how we perceive and understand colors. There is a part called occipital lobe in the back of the head. It is mainly functioning for distance and depth. Another thing, how do we recognize our face? And third thing is how do we perceive colors? And all three things are happening in one way, one place only, which is responsible with the surrounding we are into. So the color perseverance is not only how we are perceiving, how we are seeing, how we are catering towards the surrounding, how we are meeting different people, how we are catering to different relationships. All together comes and gives you the clarity of color, how we are perceiving. So when we say putting certain colors into educational spaces according to somebody's choice or preference, no, it's more about what climatic condition you are into, what nature is giving you, which group you are in, certain color, certain spaces. Yeah.
The beauty of the entire thing just to, is that all this is so much is happening in the background without you realizing or being conscious about it. That is the play of color, the impact of color, on your emotion, because it's all happening in the background. You may, your instinctive first reaction may be a particular one,
Or
but it's actually happening with the impact of so many other emotions and so many other aspects which you are not even close to conscious about.
And Shreya ma'am, in the same conversation, how do you see contrast acting like for learning spaces as well as the spatial elements that you design, and how do you play with colors in those contrasting elements?
So, uh, in terms of any space, when you want to kind of create an impact, or you want a particular action to be the result of a color, contrast is an amazing way to create this. Like, for example, simple, you have in a darkened theater, you will have the red as a sign direction. In a On the highways, you have these blue boards, but with white reflective texts, or so contrast in itself plays a huge role to draw your attention also, and to even direct the activity you want, or the place you want to draw attention to. In a simple singular color room, one single wall, which is a bold move, kind of, and which is contrasting, suddenly creates a focal point. So, uh, I think that is the important thing of how you place two colors together as well.
Mhm. So yeah, very well explained by Shivani and Shreya ma'am. So before concluding this theme, I have a final question for Pooja ma'am. So ma'am, how do you ensure that you are giving exposure to all these colors to learners, because you are also having learning aids for them.
Right.
So how do you ensure that?
Yeah, I think very, very relevant question, Akshay, and thank you for asking. Color is actually playing a very significant role in our product development process, because now, so last year when we started by launching a product in experiential hands-on science, only science, for schools across the country. Now this year we are already we are launching our next subject, which is experiential maths with applications in real world finance. The third subject that's soon coming out is experiential social sciences, and then art integration, and then languages. Now, the simple question, we sat down as a team and we asked ourselves, what is that one single design element which is going to differentiate our one product from the other, from the third, and so on. Because last year when we started, we thought, okay, we'll only do science for quite some time, so we didn't have to think so much. But today, I mean, literally, like the last few weeks, we have been only brainstorming around, what are the kind of color choices we will make consciously, which will stand out very clearly for each of our product offerings, which goes out. So, like, let's say, for example, and I could, for example, show you something. So, like, let's say, we have this entire kit for experiential hands-on science. Now, while using a black background to kind of connote a blackboard remains standard, while hands-on remains in white consistently. But what keeps changing is the color for every subject. So we did our quick research. We went and spoke to kids, and this was literally all about interesting group discussions we did in terms of what comes to your mind when you think, what colors come to your mind when you think of science. Now, obviously, these were not direct connections, right? So, what color comes to your mind when you think of maths and applications in finance? So, we went through several colors and then we said, okay, science, yes, all right. So, if we were to pick a unique color, maybe sulfur, experiments with sulfur, etc. And sulfur is yellow. So maybe that typical yellow, that lemon yellow, is something that we can associate science with. Then as we are now going to soon launch experiential math with applications in real world finance, then it came to green as the color of money. Yeah, so now our product on math with finance is green. Then the third subject that's coming out soon is experiential social sciences, where our brainstorming still continues. And I'm going to, look forward to ideas and suggestions from this panel also in coming days, in terms of, what color should we zero down to for social sciences. Similarly, for art integration, we're kind of somewhere circling between a pink or an orange kind of a theme. So colors are actually playing a very significant role today in deciding our distinguished product offerings and making them stand out as a unique offering for each segment. So that's the kind of application we're doing. So subjects is one. The other thing is the curriculum. Now we are catering to all curriculum from CBSE to IB to Cambridge. So even within that, we have color streams. We've kind of identified a single color that will run through all our CBSE offerings, a single color that will run through all our IB offerings. So whether the offering is in the form of a consumer facing, student facing workshop, or whether it's in the form of collaterals for teachers, or whether it's any back end work. But as long as it's for a particular curriculum, it will all connect to that single color. So that's now the kind of the length and breadth of color application that's happening in all our design entities, and our designer is completely, neck deep into arriving at these choices as we launch more and more products.
So that was also about color consistency that gives a higher brand recall value.
True.
And while you told about green color, I was very happy. Yes, let that come in because it's related to money. And while you told about red color, yes, that reminded me of the red ink from my teacher's pen and the marks that I got in mathematics, of course.
Akshay, I'm so glad you pointed this out, because you know what? In fact, one of the things I really wanted to highlight in today's discussion was the amazing departure that has finally taken place in our education system from teachers using that red ink wala pen for all grading assessments. And it was such a sharp contrast. I mean, imagine on a white answer sheet, you're being graded for your spelling error, ye galat hai, ye spelling error hai, ye question incomplete hai. You're getting 2 out of 10 or 5 out of 100 with that red mark. It would just come and sit on your heart like a rock. Yeah, it is such an amazing, conscious, beautiful departure from that red ink to teachers now globally consciously using green ink in all their assessments and grading. So today, when my children come back home, and they have those green ink remarks and comments and grading done on their assessment sheets, trust me, as a parent, I feel so welcoming, and it's such a positive connotation. I mean, I take that feedback even as a parent. I mean, I'm sure children are obviously connecting with that, but as a parent who has seen that era of red ink wala assessment to now a green pen assessment, it is such a welcoming, positive connotation of feedback. I feel more as a participant to that feedback, that yeah, I mean, we are collaboratively working on improvements, on academic progress. And it is not like, there is one single person, a teacher, who has called out an error or who has called out as something which is blatantly wrong, and the child and parent are feeling terrible about it. So just that change, a small change, but it's a significant change. It's literally a leap, in the assessment and marking territory. And color has played such a role that moving from red to green has suddenly made learning more collaborative between parents and teachers, versus it just becoming, teacher ne ye likh diya, bol diya, and that's it. So that's the impact that color in assessments and learning aids, has on our brains and on our reactions.
So during our school days, green color was mostly used by principal and vice principal.
Yes.
And now I'll tell you the difference. If they are giving remark to me, very talkative in green ink, okay, that seemed okay, very cool. I'll get it set straight from my parents. In red, oh, very fearful.
I would
Correct.
like to add one point over here in your point only, Pooja, that when in design college we used to get remarks, it was always black sheet, blue pen that faculty will use, and
Ah,
instead of the grade A plus B plus number, they always put a comment ki you are a good observer, or you are a good perceiver, you are good in drawing, you are bad at this. So that is the actual feedback we were looking for since childhood, ki why it was not there at that time.
Correct.
I'm getting it at design college but not getting it over there, and it
Yes.
gives me a better clarity and understanding ki where I can improve, where I can, work upon on myself, instead
Yes.
of understanding that B plus, okay, it makes sense. No, it doesn't help me in growing.
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
that blue pen makes sense कि हाँ ठीक है, they are
exactly.
not judging me, they're giving me a positive feedback for my growth and development.
Very true. I mean, it has almost, I would say, changed the conversation on a child's confidence. You know,
Yes,
वो red
totally.
mark वाला sheet देखो तो लगता है कि my God, I'm like really bad. And
True
just
that.
changing color has made such a significant impact on our brains, where it's like, my teacher is only helping me get better, and
It's
we
like
are in it together collaboratively.
it's
Yes.
So
like
in
the
education,
earlier one was a report card and now it's a progress card.
Yes.
yeah,
That
very
is
true. No,
that
color is making learning more accessible, more inclusive, more collaborative. Like a simple thing like addressing the needs of students with color blindness. Yeah, now that is something which we are also studying. We are still in the process of studying and exploring, and we still have a lot of work to do in that area. And as we are increasing our reach across students, across a category of schools, we will soon be, facing these obvious questions that how do you design learning resources which cater to, which are inclusive, which are diverse? How can you not be obviously ignorant of that aspect? So for example, typically your colors like around red green in combination, right, are very difficult colors for somebody who has color blindness. They'll never be able to differentiate a red from a green or green from a red. Yeah, now for someone who has never faced that aspect can take this issue very lightly, but for somebody who's been born with it or who's grown up with that, it can make a huge difference in their learning outcomes. So how do you design for visual aids, for learning aids, which is inclusive, which takes care of that? Where can your text be in very sharp contrast to your background, so that it is not missed out, and it is understood by a learner who may be anywhere in the in the neurodivergent spectrum. So whether it's autism, whether it's color blindness, how do you take care of the entire neurodivergent spectrum in learning? And color plays a very important role there.
Okay, so the last 15 minutes turned out to be one of the most delighting ones we ever had in our LinkedIn live. And yes, that random conversation turned into a very amazing discussion. And this calls for the conclusion of the second theme. And the final theme coming up for us is color and cognition, learning space application. So the first question goes to Shivani. Could you please share some key findings from your research on how color specifically impacts learning and cognition, particularly in children? And what are some practical recommendations for creating effective learning spaces?
Okay. Um, I would like Ablash to present the slide, and I would like to mention one thing that everybody agrees on this, that colors are emotions. Colors has the power to, delve, allows you to delve into emotion, allows you to spark certain emotions. If colors has so much power to change your behavior, change your attitude, change your perseverance and perspective to understand something, then colors, especially in educational spaces, hold certain things with them. So, one particular suggestion I would give for all the educational spaces, designers, and architects, that whenever we are putting the color into any space, enclosed space, the major thing which works over there is the ratio in which we are putting the color. So there is a thing 60, 30, and 10. So 60% should be the dominant color, 30% should be the subdued color, and 10% should be the accent color. So if you want to put red, but you have to figure out in what percentage you want to put red into any space. So whenever we create a color palette, whenever we put colors in educational spaces, we have to balance out colors in certain ratio. This would be my particular suggestion for all the designers and architects to use this, and then see how balanced out the space is. Like you just said, few colors are very attracting and attention seeking, like red, yellow, orange, warm colors especially. So in a collaborative space, if I'm putting one wall with yellow color and I'm giving a writable surface over it, it will automatically grab students attention towards it, and they will automatically go over, sit, scribble, do infographics, illustration, chit chat. So that is one of the way I'm putting a bright yellow again, but in a certain ratio, in 10% of the space. So I would be also able to create that focus point, and again the entire space is balancing out with that particular color. So whenever we create palettes, we always put two colors as the dominant color, which you are going to use over the walls, over the major panels, and 30% should be the secondary color, which you can uh, incorporate through furnitures, through shelvings, and 10% should be the accent color. Maybe it could be one particular wall, maybe it could be one particular soft board, or one particular type of furniture where you want students to come, just collaborate, communicate, think, whatever they feel like doing. And whenever we create these palettes, we always need to refer that basic color theory, which is monochromatic analogous, because in one palette you can create combine two of the theories and create one out of it. Because a lot of people get confused, what tint should we use, or what tone should we use, or what hue should we use. So this is one of the way to to understand it, ki all the basic theories now imply it over here, and put it into certain ratio, and understand ki this ratio is always going to create the balancing space. Of course, the major consideration points while creating any educational space comes, for me it comes like, first the climatic zone, then for what age group you are catering to, and then how you are making the color palette balanced in that entire space. So we talk about different zones in educational spaces, like this is culinary lab, this is maker space, this is wet and messy area, this is dry and messy area. But we are not breaking, not creating the walls to break those spaces. We are also trying to incorporate the entire space as one. So balancing that entire space, where each and every zone has its own feeling, and all together the space is also creating the environment for learning. That is a bit hard, but I feel ki the more you understand the climate, the more you understand what age group you are catering to, and how you are using that 60-30-10 ratio will give you all the answers, and the space will automatically uplift. Yeah. That's what my take about it. Yeah.
Superb explanation, Shivani. Thank you for sharing that ratio also, and for all the palettes and how they can be selected. And this conversation goes on to architect Shreya now. So, ma'am, how do you see color being used to promote inclusion and accessibility within learning spaces you design, especially for diverse learners?
Um, so, colors kind of evoke a lot of emotions, uh, which can be used to kind of direct the and help in directing the children's attention, or the users attention towards the emotion you want to achieve for a particular space. So for example, when you're looking for to create a more for a nap time, like nap times are nowadays something that you often have in preschools. So for that purpose, you would not want to create a vibrant red, vibrant orange kind of a tonality. You would want it to be softer, more relaxed. So uh, understanding that the emotion that you are trying to achieve is one of the main ways to direct the color that you are going to apply to a space. Even in terms of for people with diverse learning, if you're looking to ensure that they're not overstimulated, which is very very much of an issue with uh, uh, too many bright lights, too much activity happening. You kind of ensure that the background then for them is softer, more neutral tones. It is not too vibrant, so that they can then focus on other stimulations rather than the color palette. In learning classrooms, you might want to again help focus them. So a particular wall you might want to highlight so that their attention is more drawn to that wall rather than all over, and it helps avoid too much distraction for them. So it is extremely important to understand the emotion that you're trying to, then even using contrasts, as we discussed, that it helps in directing or taking them to the directing their entire attention in a particular manner, without making it obvious, even in a singular space. If you want to divide the room or a larger floor space into various types of learning environment, like in game rooms or in play areas, multi-purpose rooms, you can achieve that by again creating a corner which is much more vibrant versus a corner which is much more neutral versus a stimulating corner with contrasts. And contrast can also help direct your eye towards a particular point. So if you're doing signages, if you're doing in learning environments, contrasts are an excellent way to ensure that you're achieving that without it being written only, like without it being very very like a more subtle way of implying something rather than directly saying it at times. So I think this is if you once understand the emotion that you're trying to achieve in a space, for any diverse category of kids uh, with different kinds of abilities, you can try and it's not about color preference, it's more about the science behind the color and the effect it has on the emotion to achieve the result you want in a space.
Perfect. Thank you so much for highlighting about stimulations and emotions evoked by colors in learning spaces and how contrast brings focal attention towards spatial elements in the learning environments. Now, let's move on to the final question of this session and let's have it from Pooja ma'am. Ma'am, from your experience at Tinker Village, how important it is to make color choices that are inclusive and accessible in children's learning and play spaces.
Right. So, Akshay, in fact, I mean, I was just sharing this a little bit earlier, and maybe I'll just talk about it. That more and more educators need a very conscious attempt and a conscious attention to the fact that, firstly, education has to be all encompassing, it has to be all inclusive. So, awareness towards a neurodivergent spectrum and how they respond to their environment, and therefore how they take away learning from that becomes extremely essential. Like as Shreya was mentioning, there are certain type of learners for whom an hyper stimulated or a overstimulated environment absolutely does not work. Whereas for some, they need that active and overstimulated environment, to kind of keep them going. Similarly, in learning aids that we are developing, and as I was mentioning, we still need to study and research a lot more to understand what role specifically color plays, in being able to either engage with a learner, or it can completely isolate or alienate them from that aid. Right now, internationally, there is tremendous research and a material that's available. In fact, one of the groups we used to work with very closely at Asian Paints was a color marketing group, CMG, that's based out of New York. And they do fantastic research on color every year. They come out with a color trends report, which is published, and that's used as an authentic report for all sectors across industries. So for example, the trends in color that we see in automobiles, suddenly you see a nice lemon yellow scooty or a car, or now the I hear the ambassador is back on Indian roads, and I can't wait to see what color palette ambassador will come out with. But a whole lot of applications come across industries for choice of color in their product, comes from these annual color trend reports. And in fact, at Asian Paints, we launched our very first color trends research and report around 18 years back, and it continues to be an annual affair now. But what is more important coming from these reports is that they're now catering to a more and more diverse audience. So it's no longer assuming that all your audience are at the same level, of cognition or neuro divergence. It's firstly being aware that, whether you're a designer or an architect or an educator, you're catering to that spectrum. And therefore, how is color? I mean, we all recognize and we all discuss today that color is an emotion. How is that taken up by learners? So yeah, so that is a space we will continue to research, to be able to make effective learning aids for a very inclusive audience. Like as I was mentioning, if you're addressing that for students with color or vision deficiencies, and you're consciously then working towards the fact that red green cannot be put together in close combination, because that will never be understood and perceived. Now, as educators, it's very easy to assume that the child has not understood, he's not paying attention, he's not focused. So these kinds of assumptions or these kind of labels get so easily applied when we don't have that perception and knowledge, whereas somebody would just simply be struggling to differentiate a red from a green. So yeah, so I think all of us in all professions, whether we are designing for learning spaces, homes, offices, etc., being aware to the fact that we are all catering to a divergent set of audience with divergent neuro needs becomes a very essential part of our work life, as we build products. And as I was saying, color will continue to be a dominant language of communication, in the brands and products that we roll out.
Thank you for that take, ma'am. We really admire how you made us realize that we have to raise awareness towards neurodivergent spectrum to be implemented while designing and developing learning environments as well as learning aids. So that calls for the conclusion of all three themes. And now let's move on to the final quick round where we'll be asking a same question to all the guest panelists, and you will be getting 2 minutes to answer your take on it. So the question coming up in this final round is, it's related to the future of color, trends, and innovations. So, what emerging trends or technologies do you see shaping the future of color in design, particularly in spaces for children? And how do you envision color contributing to sustainable and human centered spaces? So, let's start with Pooja, ma'am.
Okay, I think I will probably comment to that more as an observer, and I think Shreya, being the architect, will be able to actually lend more light on that. As an observer, specifically colors for learning spaces, like I was mentioning earlier, have become. I mean, the only term I will comes to my mind is colors are fearless now. People are not scared of experimenting with colors. They're going with bold choices. They're going with informed choices about the use case of color for a particular zone. So, in fact, like Shivani was mentioning, you no longer necessarily need walls to differentiate one area from another. Color can do that job. So, if you're building for a reading nook versus you're building for a high activity energy zone or an art room, color alone plays a very significant role in deciding for learning spaces. And India today is seeing an absolute breath of fresh air when it comes to application of color in learning spaces.
Thank you for that take. Shreya, ma'am, it's time for your take, please.
So, as Pooja mentioned, I think definitely boldness of choice, uh, experimenting of in tonality and the range of colors is huge, uh, and I think for me as a designer, the awareness of color as a science and not and its impact on emotion is something that is spreading across the industry, where they're understanding a lot more about colors, and so the impact uh, uh, in a space, and that will impact the future of the industry, of how colors are used within the industry as well. It is no longer just about putting one color on another. Even materiality and texture is something that is being experimented with a lot more, um, compared to what it was earlier. So yeah, I think that is the future, in terms of knowing that color is not just what you decide at the end of the project, but it is something that defines right from the beginning, and it has a much more subtle impact on someone, rather than just an end choice, is where we're heading towards. That understanding itself is where we're heading towards.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing the science of color and how it can play a balance between form and function. So, Shivani, your turn. Please share your take.
Uh, so, if we talk about trends and technologies, the first thing I would like to mention, she mentioned, Pooja mentioned that CMG from New York, every year they release a color paper on the how what color trends we are setting this year. So same way WGSN, Pantone, every year they decide their color palette, they decide color of the year. And especially when we talk about trends, then colors are not coming because they have thought that this particular color should be go to next year. The major thing which impact us is the global concerns. What are the global concerns which we are facing today? That defines the mega trends, that defines the micro trends, then the trends in architecture, trends in tourist, trends in consumer goods, trends in food, trends in lifestyle. All together, by the end of the day, by going through this circle, then they come and decide that this should be the color of the year, or this should be the color palette of the year. Especially matlab from the textile background, when during the pandemic we were seeing a lot of tie dye was flourishing at that time because of the pandemic. The entire situation, entire surrounding was very disruptive, very aggressive. And tie-dye, from the core, it's the hippie culture of showing love, showing colorful, bringing colorful back into your life. So the global concerns always decide ki what is going to be the color of the year, what is going to be the trend of the year, either in fashion industry, either in lifestyle industry, either in consumer goods, whatever segment we take around. And apart from trends and technologies, especially for educational spaces, I don't find ki trend will make more sense over there. Instead of that, all the research and the places, the things which we have just talked about, that will align more towards it. Because you just said that human centered design, yeah, human centered goal. So when it's about human centered, then the purpose of that space or the place becomes more important. The way Shreya just mentioned now, the what emotion we want the student to have into certain space. So that emotion is more like, for me, what intended activity we want to the kids to have over there. So if we define the intended activity, then we'll be able to place the right color over there, right choices of color over there, right balance, right palette. So trends and technologies are working for all the commodities which we are having today, but for educational spaces, I feel ki there are more things which are more important, which we should cater for. It's the purpose that student is there for learning or the growth and development. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good that you shared that last line, or else my next counter question was coming. Would you be using that Pantone color of the year
No,
2025 in learning
no, no,
spaces in
no,
Mocha Mosi?
no. I am, because of from the fashion industry, I understand ki why do we release certain sort of trends, why we are falling towards it. But especially for educational spaces, I won't suggest. Yes.
Perfect, perfect. So thank you to all the guests for sharing their take, and thank you for participating in all these three sessions. This occasion of International Color Day turned out to be very fruitful and full of wisdom from three of the icons coming from diverse industries and sharing their insights and how their insights can go on to help designers, architects, as well as educators. So thank you to Pooja ma'am, thank you to Shreya ma'am, and thank you to Shivani for joining us live for this LinkedIn live session organized by CIVOM. And to everyone watching us live from all parts of the world, please stay in touch and keep following the pages of all our guests and the pages of CIVOM to know more about design, colors, and the trends in learning spaces. Thank you so much for joining us, and let's meet next time.
Thank you, Akshay.
Thank you so
Thank you, Akshay. You've been an amazing host, and thank you for making our day so colorful. You
No,
know,
I'll
It is
remember
very
red and green marks now.
very interesting conversation. Lots of learning for me as well.
yes,
Same.
same
Thank
here.
you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you. Thank you so
Shivani and Shreya.